Just to define the key term, Caribbean identity may be described as a product of the way Caribbean people view themselves and also how this image is construed in the global community. Identity is dynamic and fluid and may take various forms through time and space. However, music, dress, dance, and language characterized by the various different creoles were the avenues through which identity was expressed in the video, Wrestling with the Angels. The Caribbean story is one of a people who have survived through colonialism, chattel slavery, and indentureship through to independence. An independence, however, which is still very much characterized by the power relations of the colonial era. What do I mean? Due to liberalization and globalization, much of the major decision makers still reside in the global north, not very different from the hierarchical setting established on the Caribbean plantation. Who really decides on international affairs? In defining the Caribbean, one must be aware of the geographical, political, and historical definitions of the Caribbean region and how these definitions affect the focal lens placed on Caribbean people. The video, in my opinion, took into consideration the historical definition of the Caribbean. Therefore, the Caribbean may be described as a diverse blend of nationalities and cultures which all share a common historical background of colonialism. We are the derivatives of a collision between the European, African, and Asian groups which passed through the islands which were then settled by the Neo Indians. Stuart Hall, in the book Caribbean Cultural Identity, describes this as an identity of oneness, a shared legacy of our colonial experience and ancestry. The images and ideas expressed by Caribbean music videos are to some extent reflective of the context in which these songs were written, in order to send a particular message or tell a particular story. What may also be seen are diluted versions of the Caribbean reality that was sensitized in order to meet the standards of the international market. For example, the music video that stemmed from the song Life Sweet, sung by Vibes Cartel, resulted in a second edited version that got airplay on the international scene. Also, DJs, as they are referred to in Jamaica, are forced to produce edited versions of their dancehall music, an art form which is truly Caribbean, in order to get airplay on the international scene. Hence, misconceptions of the Caribbean reality may penetrate the international platform. Well, this takes us back to the definition of Caribbean identity that we stated earlier, particularly how Caribbean images are construed in the international community. Scenes and gestures that invoke thoughts that reflect the ideal Caribbean could be described as a Caribbean look. This is what the foreign music producers refer to, ideas that germinate a mindset planted in the true Caribbean. It is this famous thought that causes me to disagree with Stuart Hall in the article Cultural Identity and Diaspora, where he subscribed to the notion of identity as imagined or fictitious. To the contrary of Eniola Delton's pronouncements in the video, we as a people are definitely in control of what we look like. However, with the forces of westernization and Eurocentricity driven by globalization, it may be easier to adapt or mimic what is seen on the mainstream. In the mind, this is validated by a sense of feeling a part of or attaining a particular status as it relates to development. Cultural legacy is the knowledge passed down through generations by which a people is identified. The cultural legacy being created for the future Caribbean generation is not singular. In fact, it is very diverse and would vary throughout the islands. As such, the legacy being passed on is one of adaptation, change, and fluidity. I must agree with Brian St. Just when he states that the Caribbean is not seen as a group. In fact, for most people, when you tell them about the Caribbean, they think of Jamaica. They are simply unaware that Jamaica is but one island along a chain of islands that make up the Caribbean region. I must also agree with Rascasa when he states that there is a lot within the region to be offered to the outside world. To get a full grasp of what the region has to offer, one must step down from the Caribbean level and take a look at what each individual territory contributes to the Caribbean experience. Whether it be the hospitality and hot springs of St. Kitts and Nevis, the rich history of Jamaican reggae, or the harmonious notes of the Trinidadian steel pan, the Caribbean experience is endless. After watching the video, a foreigner would be amazed at the dynamics that underlie the Caribbean region relating to the outside world. The foreigner would then view the Caribbean as very unique with an identity rich with history intertwined with many others and maybe even their own. Whereas the native's impression may not be as pronounced, a sense of awareness may prevail.